After the Fact, a podcast by Pew, keeps it real with data-driven insights on today's big issues. No spin, just facts, mixed with stories from experts, policymakers, and people making a difference. Whether you're into the research or the personal stories behind it, we've got you covered. So what are you waiting for? Listen to After the Fact wherever you get your podcasts. Today on CityCast DC, we're talking about DC's economic plans to move beyond the federal government. Also, some people who allegedly wrote mean graffiti on Teslas are being investigated for hate crimes. And baseball is starting. We're talking about how to get the most out of a trip to Nats Park. Plus, stick around for an exciting members-only fourth segment about DC's endearing ability to memeify national news events like this week's Signal scandal. I'm here with Junaid Dil from Axios and my CityCast colleague Priyanka Tilve. Today is Friday, March 28th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Junaid.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Priyanka.
Hello, good to be here.
Good to see you, my friend. So some news broke last night in the form of a presidential executive order targeting crime and filth in D.C. It's not a takeover of the city. It's a task force and directing various agencies to do stuff and accompanied with a lot of insulting language about the city's own decisions. We're still sort of absorbing what it all means, and we're going to be covering it on Monday. But in the meantime, there was this report this week from the Urban Institute. It was covered in the Business Journal. It said DC's unemployment rate could hit 7.3%. It's 2.8% now. The report actually was if the federal government cuts half of its civilian staffers, which we don't know if that's going to happen, but it gives numbers for, what if they only cut 25% of their civilian staffers? And either way, it's like these are pretty big numbers that would then kind of trickle into the economy of everybody else who lives here in terms of housing prices and in terms of like the city, how much they'd be on the hook for unemployment insurance and other things. So it's rough stuff. And Junaid, I think you did your piece, you did interviews in Axios this week with the city's economic planning chief and the head of Metro. We're sort of right on time for this kind of frightening moment where you talk with them about the sort of eternal Washington, D.C. dream of diversifying the economy beyond being a sort of one industry government town. That's something people have always talked about here. It is a much more diversified economy than it used to be. Where is it and where do they see it going?
Yeah, exactly. That's the elusive dream that everyone's talked about. We got to diversify DC's economy. Some people think it hasn't diversified that much, actually. But I spoke to Randy Clark and I spoke to Deputy Mayor Nina Albert. She's in charge of economic development. This is her portfolio now. And look, they're eyes wide open about the problem. Randy Clark said there is a regional conversation now about if all these federal agencies left DC, we'll have a much different region. And that matters for him because they're customers of his Metro. They go in and out of the system, obviously. Metro ridership, rail ridership is still not at the pre-pandemic level because even though more federal employees are taking it, now he's having to contend with this whiplash of some of these federal employees don't have jobs, may not have jobs. So he wants to obviously have other, customers. People will go to the Nats games, people will go to other things, but it's such a big integral part of the region, obviously. And Nina Albert, I spoke to her, she didn't have the immediate solution. And I think what she sort of said was, it's going to take 3 or 4 years to get up and out of this situation that the region finds itself in now. The CFO says the city will enter a mild recession in the next fiscal year, and that 1 in 5 federal jobs will disappear in DC over the next 3 or 4 years. So the city is very much still trying to get a grip on how to handle this.
Something that really stood out to me was that Nina Albert told you that they're kind of leaning in on RFK Stadium, which I found interesting given that it is going to be so expensive to build and we're concerned about city budget right now. What exactly did she say about that?
Exactly. They are going all in on this sports economy. And it's not clear to me that this is gonna make up. This is not a silver bullet. Sports and entertainment makes up actually not that big of a piece of the city's economy. Anyways, though, these are some of the things that they need to focus on because they want to redevelop RFK. She said you can fit 3 wharfs plus a stadium at RFK. Well, that creates all the jobs and economic activity. DC is going to shift into much more of a development focused economy, a much more sports and entertainment focused economy. And it's not clear to me that that will make up for these federal job losses, but it's sort of the best thing that the mayor's office right now is betting on. And I asked her about the budget. DC may need to cut $2 billion from its budget. I asked her, you're near your debt limit. You can't borrow that much more money. And we're all waiting for the budget that the mayor is going to put out now. That's going to be where they actually hash out how they pay for the stadium. And she said, look, we have an operating budget. We have a capital budget. The capital budget's for the stadium. And she seemed pretty confident, but they're very intent that they got to build the stadium.
I mean, the sort of bread and circuses idea of cities, of, make them places for spectacle when the other parts of the economy go away, that in a weird way, it's like the biggest knock on building a stadium is the kind of opportunity cost, is that is such a rare thing, open space in the city of very expensive housing, that it's a bad idea to use it for anything other than creating lots of houses for lots of people. But if these unemployment rates go where they might, that's also going to hit housing. And so that the knock on the stadium of, well, we need to build more housing to make it affordable, that might be less of a knock in a year or two. But listen, you cover City Hall in your job. I'm curious what the politics of this are as Mayor Bowser and her government try to play nice with Congress and with the Trump administration. It seems to me that one thing this Congress and the Trump administration are into is things that please billionaires, like the kinds of people who own football teams, either in Washington and around the NFL. So is going all in on the stadium also a case of them intentionally going all in on something that is going to be politically easy to do with the Republicans they have to work with?
I think even really progressive members of the council are sort of resigned to the belief that this stadium is going to happen, because I don't think there's a lot of fight that we've seen yet against the stadium. Now, we don't know what the deal that the city and the commanders are working on. We don't know what the terms are, if they're giving away all this money or not. But I think there's a recognition that there's not a lot of room to pursue progressive ideas right now and progressive ways of trying to grow the city, whatever that might be. There's a lot more of this old school city discussion of, well, we got to build a stadium, we got to do this big project, we got to do that thing. I don't know if it's Congress necessarily pressure having any sort of effect on it, but in terms of building a stadium, but they're limiting what the city council, what the DC council can do in terms of passing progressive laws. They can't really pass a lot of these progressive measures or pursue those kinds of things. They're instead pursuing sort of bread and butter things like building new big projects or public safety laws.
And Nina also talked about other things they're excited about right now in terms of development stuff that are kind of adjacent to the federal pullback.
Yeah, and this is where the city and the Trump administration, it's kind of a win-win if it happens at least, but Trump wants to get rid of these federal buildings in Southwest. There's a big cluster of buildings between the National Mall and the Wharf, and you could have this brand new splashy neighborhood between the mall and the Wharf. You could, I guess, Nina Albert said you could leave your house, you could go to the Air and Space Museum for brunch. At the cafe, you could walk to the Wharf, and it's all within walking distance in this new neighborhood. So this is a 10, 15, 20-year vision. If those buildings get offloaded, if they get demolished, I guess, or I don't know, does anyone want to live in a renovated condo building of a brutalist office. I don't know, but so maybe they demolish it. But this is the kind of stuff they are thinking about. And again, this just goes to they need to think beyond the Trump years. No matter what Trump's lasting effect on the economy is, they need to think beyond these federal job cuts and try and build sort of these new neighborhoods, these new development projects to make up for the economic loss.
I was interested in your interview with Randy because he also kind of touched on that, like the long-term, long-haul vision for Metro and also just like how they go about building projects. I thought it was really interesting that he kind of came for like environmental studies. He was like, these need to change.
Yes, I spoke to Randy Clark and he had a lot to say. He had a lot on his mind. You know, Randy is sort of hailed, I think, by many people kind of universally in the region for fixing Metro and making it better again. But he says environmental reviews and permitting and this sort of consultant class get in the way of a lot of transit projects. And I think a lot of people would agree with him, but
Wait, he gave you this example of like, all right, fine, do a big cumbersome environmental review for like a 10-lane highway, but we have to do the same thing when moving a bus stop on Georgia Avenue. Is that true?
I don't know what exactly he had to do there. He said he had to fill out some federal form to move a bus stop on Georgia Avenue. The bigger example is something where we talked about the Georgetown metro station idea. And he said that would be like the mother of all environmental reviews. And it would cost $30 billion to build a new tunnel under the Potomac from Roslyn into Georgetown and build like 17 stations. He said that would cost like $30 billion. And he was very candid. He was like, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Like, who in their right mind would build a $30 billion new rail line? So unless America can get better at building infrastructure for cheaper, it might not make sense to look at those kinds of extensions. And instead, what he's focused on is automating the system more. All across the world, new metro lines are much more automated than the DC one now. So he wants to go in that direction first off. And this is kind of funny, but he called himself the OG of Doge. This is a guy who has pushed through efficiency and modernization at Metro. And he said, if that's what Doge is, then I guess I'm Doge.
Well, it's wild to hear them talk about things with such a wide view lens, but it's also kind of refreshing to imagine the future of DC the way Nina and Randy are talking to you about it.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
So I want to talk about a rather narrow view lens thing. I wrote my column about it this week. The Metropolitan Police announced on Monday that they put out a press release with photos of 2 people who are wanted for vandalizing Teslas, vandalizing 5 different Teslas around DC. The vandalism consisted of writing on the windshields kind of anti-Elon Musk slogans like, I hate the administrative state, or I want to kill the Department of Education, or ask me about my support of Nazis, or I love Doge, things like that. This is, I think we can all agree, it is a crime. I'm not allowed to write on your car without your permission. But it's being investigated according to the police. And then it was quite a forceful press statement. It's being investigated as a potential hate crime. And I wrote, and this is what I think, that, this is another case where, DC, like all these other entities, is sort of cornered into genuflecting before the Trump agenda, the same way as getting rid of Black Lives Matter Plaza, or the police were part of the Doge operation at the United States Institute of Peace. The Trump administration's made a big show of wanting to throw the book at anybody who lays a finger on a Tesla. They're usually talking about people who like burn them, but the FBI director called it domestic terrorism. Trump has said that people should be sent to El Salvador in prisons for 20 years.
For riding on a Tesla?
Right. And look, if you run a city, you should be making sure that people can park their cars without anybody hurting their cars. It was the leap from property crime to hate crime that just sort of gobsmacked me.
Yeah, that really stood out to me too, because the maximum penalty for defacing private property in the district is a $5,000 fine and up to a year in jail. But if you get a hate crime conviction, it's significantly more than that. Like both of those penalties would increase. And I don't feel like MPD would be doing that if the Trump administration hadn't come out so strongly against all defacing of Tesla property.
Right. And just to be clear, like they have not acknowledged that. They say it has to do with the content of the messages. And the mayor's office said the mayor has had nothing to do with this decision making. But, you know, look, D.C. has a complicated law on this front. I got kind of nerdy about it. Under the category of hate crimes in D.C., in addition to race and ethnicity and religion and sexuality and so, it includes partisan or political affiliation. So what that, I talked to a bunch of lawyers, and what that seems to mean in real life, there's very little case law on this, is that like, I cannot throw you out of my restaurant for being a Democrat. I can, however, throw you out of my restaurant for like supporting abortion rights because I don't agree with that. So it's often kind of a distinction without a difference. And if you look at this particular case, the sarcastic criticism implied by these messages is of Elon or of Doge. It is not, you know.
Yeah, it's not Republicans.
Right, exactly. So, you know, that's kind of a stretch. I looked this up. In the last 4 years, there's only been one complaint for like an alleged bias act on partisan affiliation. It was somebody who wanted to take an Uber to the Capitol Hill Club, which is the Republican club on the Hill. And the Uber driver, this was right after COVID, the Uber driver had already said, like, why aren't you wearing a mask? And handed him a mask. And when the Uber driver said, like, what is that place you're going? He said, well, I'm not going to take you to some Republican club. The passenger then got out angrily, of course, spat in the mask and handed it back to the driver, and an altercation ensued. So when the passengers filed their police report, they said it was a bias incident based on their partisan identity. No charges were ever filed. That was the last anyone heard of it. The point is, people almost never bring these kinds of cases, partly maybe because the law is so flimsy and weird. But there are lots of complaints each year around bias acts about your race or your sexuality, but almost none on this partisan affiliation piece, which just makes the whole thing even weirder, unless you think about the city kind of being forced at gunpoint to play nice with the administration. And all cases in D.C. are going to be prosecuted by a U.S. attorney who is a Trump appointee and a real conservative activist.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that other case with the Uber driver, because also in that case, it was the person who felt like they were discriminated against brought it forward as a political hate crime.
They filed a police report, yeah. There were never any arrests made. Right.
But with this case, with the MPD investigating the Tesla graffiti, do we know if the people whose cars were vandalized said, like, can you please investigate this as political hate?
It's not in the police report.
Okay, so we just don't know.
The other thing is that at least in one of the cases, the owner of the car was able to clean it off with Windex because, windshields are considerably easier to clean than painted parts of the car. So it's just, again, this is a crime, right? Like if somebody writes something on my car, even if they write like, I love CityCast, which they often do, it's still a crime to write on my car. And please don't do that. But like it was the acceleration up to hate crime that struck me as like, it just happens to dovetail very nicely with the kind of messaging from around the White House.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I guess it's like, I know the mayor's office said she had nothing to do with this decision, but it does feel like another example of DC really picking its battles and being like, you know what, on this front, we're just going to like roll with it, do what the Trump administration wants. And like, it seems like a really pragmatic way to go, but also I worry about, like, you give an inch, they take a mile. Like, how many times is the city going to do this?
Well, and I think if you look at any of these institutions that have sort of bowed to Trump, the Columbia University, the Paul Weiss law firm, when you start digging into the details and you think about the people in charge, it's often like, man, they didn't really have much choice. Like a lot of us, we like to think we're righteous people, but a lot of us might have done the same thing in their shoes. And I certainly feel that way about a lot of the mayor's decisions and the city's decisions. It's just, to me, an indication of the insane moment we're in.
Hear that? It's SpringFest savings calling your name, only at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a Select Ego trimmer, blower, or mower. Plus, get your choice of any 2 bags of Miracle-Gro organic soil mix for only $16. Shop these can't-miss deals in-store or online today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Excludes Hawaii.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, so it's a little bit warmer. It's not April yet, but baseball is starting anyway. And I don't think CityCast is full of people who are competent to tell you how you should bet on games.
Most certainly not.
But we are pretty good at figuring out how to get the best out of a trip down to Nats Park, which is what Priyanka's been looking at this week. What do you got?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are so many things to be excited about with baseball season this year. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I love a baseball game because the food is typically great and the tickets are usually somewhat affordable. And this year, Nats Park is kind of leaning into both of those things. So there's a lot of discounts for this year's season. On Tuesday nights, the tickets are going to be as low as $12. And then they're also going to have kind of like an all-day happy hour thing going with $5 hot dogs, $5 nachos, popcorn, $5 pretzels, and even $5 beer. And then they're also doing bringing back their super discounted tickets for DC residents for select games. So for certain games throughout the season, tickets for DC residents will be just $5, which again that's amazing. And they're doing this standing 40% offer for anyone that is serving in the military, public school teachers, healthcare workers, government employees, first responders, and that also comes with a concessions credit. So
how about ex-government employees?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I was wondering, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about some sort of deal for recently fired federal workers, because I think that that's kind of all the rage right now in DC. But thus far, I think it's current government employees. And then also just generally, they're having their happy hour every single day run from when gates open until first pitch. So that's $5 beers and hard seltzers for $6. But then the thing that I'm really excited about is all of the new vendors. It's actually your colleague, Anna Spiegel at Axios, wrote up about how these vendors were chosen, which I think is really fun. She described it as a Shark Tank style pitch your product competition. So 23 different DMV businesses came in and presented what kind of specialty fare they would be able to offer at a ballpark, and had to make the case for how they'd be able to scale whatever this meal was to be able to serve hundreds of people on a daily basis. And the ones that got chosen are Cam and 46, which is a Filipino street fair place, Taqueria Picoso, which is tacos from these Mexico City natives, Mush, which is veggie food, sandwiches, bowls, and sides, Pho Wheels, which is Vietnamese food, and Lucky Danger, which is American Chinese takeout.
Is it pho soup at the ballpark, or are they're tacos and egg rolls, I see.
Yeah, they'll have banh mi, egg rolls, and Vietnamese tacos. I guess that was the kind of thing that they probably had to make the case for. Yeah, sure, we're called Pho Wheels, but we do these other things, which is what we'll make at the ballpark, because that makes more sense than handing out bowls of soup. I've had Cam and 46 and I've had Lucky Danger, and both of them were so delicious. I also am just generally excited to see these food spots that are, I don't know, like typically like smaller businesses in the DMV area, it's cool to see them get this platform at Nats Park. And it's also nice to see that Nats Park's food is so international, which is like a great reflection of the city.
I mean, I think that the essence of eating in a stadium or a place like that is it's got to be with your hands. So look at most of the stuff looks really good for it. I'm curious about how like lo mein will work. I mean, I get that you can have a fork or chopsticks or something, but it's kind of annoying when you're crowded in a stadium and people are walking past you and stuff. So I'm curious how that works. What would you serve, Priyanka, if you were invited onto this Shark Tank?
Yeah, I can't personally make this super well yet, but I would learn. There is so much great Indian street food, and I grew up having it. I think pani puri would work really well.
It's tough to take that with your hands.
Well, you're supposed to eat it immediately, and you're supposed to eat it with your hands.
Right.
I guess it would have to be like, it wouldn't be like a concession stand. It would have to be like a small little vendor truck like the ones that you see in Mumbai, and you'd have to like buy it and eat it right on the spot. Like you're not taking that back to your seat. You're just eating it right there while you walk to the next vendor where you're getting food.
What about you, Junaid?
Arancinis would be great, I think. That might even exist already, but just fried rice balls.
I love an arancini ball.
Yeah.
That sounds so good.
I would go Indian too, but might stick with the something wrapped in something and fried variety. So like I might go pakoras and samosas and stuff.
Ooh, yeah, that sounds great. Kati rolls could also be really good.
Well, next year, who needs this podcasting thing? Maybe we should join that Shark Tank next year.
Okay, I'll get cooking.
All right. Well, Junaid, Priyanka, awesome to see you guys.
Nice to see you too.
Great to be on as always.
And thank you all for listening today to CityCast DC. Today, paid subscribers are getting a bonus 4th roundup chat about how DC is responding to the Trump administration's now infamous Signal group chat. TLDR, something finally got the city laughing. If you want to be sure to always get the full episode, become a member. Head to membership.citycast.fm and sign up. It's only $8 a month, and members get ad-free listening, first dibs on our events, and an exclusive weekly events listing from Kayla, who writes our Hey DC newsletter. Again, sign up at membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, and Ash Durbin. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan, with additional music from Loki Link from Triple Scoop Music via Getty Images. If you enjoyed the show, text a friend or text everyone on your Houthis PC small group chat. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.